Maria Santos had never expected her life to take this turn. 6 months ago, she was cutting hair at a salon in downtown Phoenix, gossiping with customers about weekend plans and celebrity breakups. Now, she stood in the cramped beauty station of Forward Operating Base Kepler, an outpost on the alien world of Zirian Prime, trimming the regulation cuts of battle-hardened soldiers who fought against the Zephyrian Empire. The transition hadn't been easy. When Earth joined the Galactic Coalition 3 years ago, humans were considered a minor species, useful for manual labor and simple tasks, but hardly warrior material. The established alien races like the reptilian Draknari and the crystalline ethereals dominated military operations. Humans were relegated to support roles: mechanics, cooks, medics, and yes, even hairdressers. Maria had volunteered for the Civilian Support Corps partly for the adventure and partly because the pay was incredible. Supporting the war effort on distant worlds meant hazard pay that could set her up for life. She'd imagined it would be like working on a military base back home, just with different scenery. She was wrong. Zirian Prime was a hellscape. The planet's twin suns scorched the surface during the day, while at night, temperatures plummeted below freezing. The Zephyrians, an insectoid race with chitinous armor and razor-sharp limbs, had claimed the world for its rare metamorphic crystals, crystals that could power faster-than-light travel for centuries. The Coalition needed those crystals, and the Zephyrians weren't giving them up without a fight. Forward Operating Base Kepler sat in a valley between two mountain ranges, surrounded by jagged rock formations that offered natural defense. The base housed 200 Coalition forces, mostly Draknari shock troopers with their thick scales and plasma rifles, a handful of ethereal tech specialists who communicated through harmonic frequencies, and 37 humans who handled everything from food service to equipment maintenance. Maria's station was a converted supply closet with a fold-out chair and a mirror mounted to the wall. She had basic cutting tools, electric clippers that ran on the base's power grid, and enough styling products to last 6 months. Most days, she cut hair for soldiers rotating off duty, listening to their stories about skirmishes in the Crystal Caves or close encounters with Zephyrian scout units. The humans fascinated her. Unlike the other species who seemed to view military service as either a duty or a calculated career move, the human soldiers fought with something different. There was an intensity in their eyes, a fierce protectiveness that reminded her of wild animals defending their young. She'd heard the alien troops whisper about it in their own languages, using words that roughly translated to unpredictable or dangerously emotional. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen was her most frequent customer. The SEAL team leader had short black hair that she kept in a tight regulation cut, but she came to Maria's station twice a week, not for vanity, but because those 15 minutes in the chair were the only time she seemed to relax. Chen would close her eyes while Maria worked, and sometimes she would talk about home, about her daughter back on Earth who was learning to ride a bicycle. "The brass thinks we're expendable," Chen had confided during her last visit 3 days ago. "They send us on the suicide missions because losing humans doesn't impact morale like losing Draknari veterans or ethereal tech specialists." Maria had nodded sympathetically while trimming around Chen's ears. She'd heard similar complaints from other human personnel. Despite their dedication and surprising effectiveness in combat, humans were still treated as second-class members of the Coalition. That conversation felt like a lifetime ago now. The emergency klaxon shattered the afternoon quiet, its piercing wail echoing through the base's corridors. Maria dropped her scissors and rushed to the small window of her station. In the distance, she could see black smoke rising from the eastern perimeter. Plasma fire lit up the sky in brief, violent flashes. Through the intercom, Base Commander Thactor's gravelly voice announced the situation in the Coalition's common tongue. "All personnel to defensive positions. Zephyrian forces have breached the outer perimeter. Repeat, this is not a drill." Maria's hands shook as she gathered her few personal belongings. The civilian evacuation protocol was simple: report to the central bunker and wait for either the all-clear signal or extraction orders. She was halfway to the door when the lights flickered and died. Emergency power kicked in seconds later, bathing everything in a red glow that made the base feel like the inside of a beating heart. The corridors were chaos. Draknari soldiers thundered past in their power armor, their heavy footsteps making the floor vibrate. Ethereal officers glided by in their environmental suits, their crystalline bodies refracting the emergency lighting into prismatic patterns. Human personnel ran toward their assigned stations, some heading to the armory, others to the communications center. Maria pressed herself against the wall to let a squad of Draknari pass. Their leader, a scarred veteran named Krexner, barely glanced at her. To him, she was just another piece of furniture, useful when needed, invisible when not. She was almost to the bunker when the explosion hit. The blast came from somewhere deep in the base, powerful enough to knock her off her feet. The lights went out completely this time, and the emergency power struggled to restart. In the darkness, she could hear shouting in multiple languages, the distinctive whine of charging energy weapons, and underneath it all, a sound that made her blood freeze, the chittering war cries of Zephyrian shock troops. They were inside the base. Maria crawled toward what she hoped was the bunker entrance, feeling along the wall with her hands. Her palm touched something wet and warm. In the flickering emergency lights, she saw blood, bright red human blood mixed with the purple ichor that flowed through Draknari veins. A figure stumbled out of the darkness ahead of her. It was Corporal Williams, one of the human communications specialists. Half his face was covered in blood, and his left arm hung at an unnatural angle. "They came through the maintenance tunnels," he gasped, collapsing against the wall next to her. "Bypassed all our sensors. It's a full assault, at least 300 Zephyrians, maybe more." Maria helped him apply pressure to a gash on his forehead. "Where's everyone else? The bunker?" "Compromised," Williams cut her off. "They hit it first. Shaped charges, real professional job. This isn't a raid, Maria. This is an extraction operation." Before she could ask what he meant, the sound of combat grew closer. Plasma bolts illuminated the corridor in strobing blue light, and she could hear the distinctive crack of human assault rifles returning fire. Someone was making a fighting retreat toward their position. 5 figures emerged from the smoke and chaos, moving with the coordinated precision that marked them as special forces. Maria recognized Lieutenant Commander Chen immediately, even covered in dust and alien blood. Behind her came the rest of her SEAL team, Rodriguez, Kim, Thompson, and Jackson. They moved like a single organism, each covering a different angle while Chen directed their withdrawal. "Civilian," Chen spotted Maria and Williams immediately. "What's your status?" "Williams is wounded, bunkers compromised," Maria reported, surprising herself with how steady her voice sounded. Chen's expression darkened. She activated her communicator and spoke in rapid, clipped sentences. "Overlord, this is Phoenix 6. Primary evacuation point is down, requesting immediate extraction at secondary LZ." Static answered her. She tried again, adjusting frequencies. "Phoenix 6 to any coalition forces, do you copy?" More static. Then, cutting through the interference, came a transmission in heavily accented English. The voice was mechanical, filtered through a Zephyrian translator device. "Human soldiers, your communication array has been destroyed. Your alien commanders have abandoned you. Surrender now, and you will be granted the honor of serving the Zephyrian Empire as prisoners of war." Chen's jaw tightened. She looked at her team, then at Maria and Williams. Like hell. The SEAL team had been sent to investigate reports of unusual Zephyrian activity in the northern Crystal Caves. What they'd found was a staging area for a major offensive, dozens of ships, thousands of troops, and worst of all, evidence of human collaboration. Someone had been feeding the Zephyrians intelligence about coalition defenses, troop movements, and tactical weaknesses. They'd managed to plant tracking beacons and download classified data before being discovered. The fighting retreat back to base had cost them their vehicle and nearly their lives. Now, trapped in an overrun outpost with no communication and no support, they faced an impossible situation. "Ma'am," Rodriguez spoke up, his voice tight with controlled anger. "We got confirmation before the comm went down. The brass knew this attack was coming. They pulled out all non-essential personnel yesterday, all the aliens anyway." Chen closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, Maria saw something there that made her stomach clench with fear. It wasn't just anger or determination. It was the look of someone who had just realized they'd been betrayed. "They left us," Kim whispered. "They actually left us to die." The corridor shook as another explosion echoed through the base. Closer this time. The chittering sounds were getting louder, and Maria could smell something like burnt cinnamon, the scent that Zephyrians gave off when they were in combat mode. Chen made a decision. "We fall back to the secondary bunker. It's smaller, easier to defend. We hold position and wait for..." She was interrupted by Williams, who had managed to get his portable scanner working. His face went pale as he read the display. "Commander, I'm picking up 52 distinct Zephyrian heat signatures converging on our position. They're not just attacking randomly, they're hunting us specifically." Maria felt the blood drain from her face. 52 elite enemy soldiers against 5 wounded SEALs, 1 injured communications specialist, and a hairdresser. The mathematics of survival were brutally simple. Chen looked at each of them in turn. "All right, people, looks like we're about to find out what we're really made of." Outside, the sounds of battle were fading. The base had fallen. But in that corridor, surrounded by the smell of blood and the approaching chittering of their enemies, something else was beginning. Something that would challenge everything the galaxy thought it knew about humanity. Maria Santos gripped a fallen soldier's pistol with hands that had spent years holding nothing more dangerous than scissors. She was about to discover that sometimes, the most unlikely people become exactly who they need to be when everything else falls apart. The secondary bunker was barely large enough for 6 people, let alone 7. Built into the base's foundation, it had been designed as a last-resort fallback position, a place where essential personnel could hold out until rescue arrived. Now it felt more like a tomb. Maria pressed herself against the reinforced concrete wall, trying to stay out of the way as Chen's team set up defensive positions. The bunker had only one entrance, which made it easily defendable but also meant they were trapped. The thick walls would protect them from plasma fire, but they wouldn't stop the Zephyrians from simply waiting them out. Rodriguez and Kim worked to barricade the entrance with whatever they could find: storage containers, broken equipment, even chunks of debris from the attacks. Thompson tended to Williams's injuries with a field medical kit, while Jackson attempted to repair their communications equipment using spare parts scavenged from the corridor. Chen stood in the center of it all, her tactical mind working through their options. Maria watched her face, seeing the calculations running behind her eyes: ammunition counts, structural weaknesses, probable enemy tactics. It was the expression of someone who refused to accept defeat, even when defeat seemed mathematically certain. "Status report," Chen ordered quietly. "Barricades as good as it's going to get," Rodriguez reported. "Won't stop a determined assault, but it'll slow them down." "Communications are fried," Jackson added, holding up the remnants of their radio. "Whatever they used to knock out the main array also scrambled our personal units. We're completely cut off." Thompson looked up from Williams's injuries. "He's stable, but he needs real medical attention. Lost a lot of blood, and I think his arm's broken in 2 places." Chen nodded, processing the information. "Ammunition. 2 magazines each for primary weapons, plus sidearms," Kim answered. "Maybe 300 rounds total." "Against 52 hostiles," Chen mused. "Not great odds." Maria found her voice. "What about the extraction protocol? Don't they have automated systems for situations like this?" The look Chen gave her was gentle but devastating. "The extraction protocol requires either a distress beacon or confirmation from base command that personnel need evacuation. Our beacon was destroyed with the communications array and base command." She paused. "Base command evacuated 12 hours ago." The words hit Maria like a physical blow. They knew this was going to happen, and they left us." "Not all of us," Thompson said bitterly. "Just the humans. The Draknari and ethereal personnel were reassigned to other duties yesterday. Emergency rotation, they called it." Rodriguez spat something in Spanish that didn't need translation. "Expendable, that's what we are to them. Useful enough to do the dirty work, not valuable enough to save when things go bad." Maria's mind reeled. She thought about the alien soldiers she'd seen rushing through the corridors during the attack, how none of them had even glanced at the human personnel. How they'd seemed to know exactly where to go, as if they'd been briefed on escape routes she'd never heard of. "So what do we do?" she asked. Chen was quiet for a long moment. Outside, they could hear the systematic sounds of the Zephyrians searching the base, doors being forced open, equipment being overturned, the occasional burst of plasma fire as they eliminated resistance. The aliens were methodical, professional. They weren't just looking for survivors, they were looking for something specific. "We fight," Chen said finally. "We make them pay for every inch, and we hope that someone somewhere gives a damn about what happens to us." Williams, despite his injuries, managed a weak laugh. "You know what's funny? The Zephyrians probably respect us more than our own allies do. At least they consider us enough of a threat to send 52 soldiers. It was a dark observation, but Maria realized he was right. The galaxy saw humans as weak, emotional, and unreliable. But the Zephyrians, who had been fighting wars for millennia, had sent an entire company of elite troops to deal with 7 humans. That suggested a very different assessment of human capabilities. The sound of chittering grew closer. Chen raised her hand for silence, and they all strained to listen. The sounds were coming from multiple directions now. The Zephyrians had found the bunker and were surrounding it. "They're not attacking," Kim observed in a whisper. "They're waiting for something." Chen frowned. Waiting for what? Her question was answered a moment later when a new voice echoed through the bunker's ventilation system. This one spoke perfect English with no translator distortion, a human voice. "Lieutenant Commander Chen, this is Colonel Marcus Webb, formerly of the 7th Human Infantry Division. I know you're in there, and I know you're listening." The name hit Chen like a slap. Webb had been a decorated human officer, one of the few who had achieved high rank in the coalition forces. He disappeared 6 months ago during a reconnaissance mission, presumed dead. "I know what you're thinking," Webb continued. "Traitor, collaborator, but I prefer to think of myself as a realist. The coalition will never see humans as equals, will always be second-class citizens, cannon fodder for their wars. The Zephyrians, on the other hand, respect strength. They judge by results, not species." Chen's face had gone white with rage. Maria could see her hands shaking as she gripped her weapon. "The data you recovered from the northern caves, we know you have it. Intelligence about our staging areas, our troop movements. Surrender it along with yourselves and you'll be treated as prisoners of war. Your aliens' friends abandoned you, but we don't have to." "He's trying to turn us," Rodriguez whispered. "Classic psychological warfare." But Maria was thinking about something else. Webb's voice, his knowledge of their mission, his certainty that they had the data, it implied a level of intelligence that went far beyond human collaboration. The Zephyrians hadn't just turned one officer. They had infiltrated the coalition's command structure. "How does he know about our mission?" she asked quietly. Chen's eyes widened as she reached the same conclusion. Real-time intelligence. Someone in coalition command is feeding them information. The implications were staggering. If the Zephyrians had agents in coalition leadership, then this attack wasn't just about Zirian Prime. It was about something much larger, a coordinated effort to eliminate human effectiveness in the war. "You have 5 minutes to decide," Webb's voice continued. "After that, my Zephyrian colleagues will come in and take what they want by force, and Commander Chen, they're much less gentle than I am." The ventilation system fell silent. 7 humans looked at each other in the dim light of the bunker, each grappling with the weight of their situation. They weren't just fighting for their lives, they were fighting for humanity's future in a galaxy that had already written them off. Chen stood up, her decision made. "Jackson, how much of that communications equipment is salvageable?" "Maybe 30%. Why?" "Because we're going to send a message. Not to Coalition Command, they can't be trusted. We're going to broadcast on all frequencies, civilian and military. Tell everyone what really happened here." Thompson looked skeptical. "Even if we get a signal out, who's going to believe us? We're talking about accusing coalition leadership of abandoning their own troops." "The truth has a way of getting out," Chen replied, "especially when people die for it." Maria found herself thinking about her customers back on Earth, the ordinary people living their lives while soldiers like Chen fought and died in distant corners of space. They deserved to know what their government was doing in their name. "What do you need me to do?" she asked. Chen looked at her with something like surprise. "Maria, you're a civilian. This isn't your fight." "It became my fight when they left us here to die," Maria replied. "I may not be a soldier, but I'm human. That seems to be enough for them to want me dead." The sound of movement outside was getting closer. Whatever they were going to do, they needed to do it quickly. Maria gripped her borrowed pistol tighter, surprised by how natural it felt in her hands. She'd never fired a weapon in anger, never trained for combat, never imagined herself in a situation like this. But she was here and she was alive, and that meant she had choices to make. The galaxy might see her as just a hairdresser, dispensable and weak. They were about to discover how wrong they could be. Chen smiled grimly and began issuing orders. "All right, people. Let's show them what humans do when they're backed into a corner. Outside the bunker, 52 alien soldiers waited with the patience of predators. They had technology, numbers, and the element of surprise. What they didn't have was an understanding of what happens when humans stop playing by rules that were never designed to protect them in the first place. The chittering grew louder. Time was running out. Jackson worked frantically with the communications equipment, his hands moving with the desperate precision of someone trying to defuse a bomb. Sparks flew as he bypassed damaged circuits and rerouted power through salvaged components. The makeshift device looked like it had been assembled by a madman, but the soft hum of charging capacitors suggested it might actually work. "How long?" Chen asked, checking her weapon for the third time. 2 minutes for a basic broadcast capability, Jackson replied without looking up. 5 if you want any real range. Through the bunker's ventilation system, they could hear the Zephyrians moving into position. The chittering had stopped, replaced by the efficient silence of soldiers preparing for assault. Maria pressed her ear to the wall and could feel vibrations, heavy equipment being moved into place. "They're bringing up breaching charges," she reported, surprising herself with how calmly she could analyze their approaching doom. Chen nodded. "Rodriguez, Kim, set up crossfire positions. Thompson, stay with Williams. Jackson, whatever you've got, we need it now." The improvised transmitter crackled to life, filling the bunker with static. Jackson fine-tuned the frequency, searching for a clear channel. Coalition military communications were encrypted and keyed to specific units, but civilian emergency frequencies were open to anyone with a receiver. "This is Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen, United Earth Navy SEALs, transmitting on all emergency frequencies." Chen spoke into Jackson's makeshift microphone. "Forward operating base Kepler has been overrun by Zephyrian forces. All Coalition personnel except humans were evacuated prior to attack. Repeat, human personnel were deliberately abandoned." Static answered her. She tried again, adjusting the frequency. "This is a priority transmission. We have evidence of Zephyrian infiltration of Coalition command structure. Human forces are being systematically eliminated. Any receiving stations, please relay this message." Maria watched Chen's face as she spoke. There was no desperation in her voice, no pleading, just the calm, professional tone of someone reporting facts. Even facing certain death, Chen maintained the discipline that had made her an effective leader. A new sound cut through the static, a human voice, distant but clear. "This is merchant vessel Lucky Strike. We copy your transmission. Stand by." Chen's eyes lit up. "Lucky Strike, this is Phoenix 6. What's your position?" "Phoenix 6, we're in system conducting mineral surveys, picking up massive energy signatures from your location. Looks like a full-scale assault in progress." "Lucky Strike, can you relay our transmission to Earth Command?" There was a pause before the response came. "Phoenix 6, be advised, we've been monitoring Coalition frequencies. Official reports state that forward operating base Kepler was evacuated yesterday due to structural instability. According to the records, there are no personnel on site." The words hit the bunker like a physical blow. The Coalition wasn't just abandoning them, they were covering it up. As far as official records were concerned, the humans trapped in this bunker didn't exist. "Lucky Strike, that's incorrect," Chen replied steadily. "We have 7 personnel trapped in defensive positions, requesting immediate assistance." Another pause. When the voice returned, it carried a different tone, one of dawning realization. "Phoenix 6, you're telling me the Coalition left people behind, and then erased them from the records?" "Affirmative. We have evidence suggesting systematic elimination of human forces through." The transmission was cut off as the bunker's lights went out completely. Emergency power failed to restart this time. In the darkness, they could hear the distinctive whine of plasma cutters working on the bunker's entrance. "They found our power source," Kim reported grimly. "Whatever we're going to do, we need to do it in the dark." Chen's mind raced through tactical options. 7 people against 52 in a confined space with no power and limited ammunition. The mathematics were impossible, but mathematics had never stopped humans before. "Listen to me," she said quietly. "The Zephyrians fight like machines. They're efficient, coordinated, predictable. They expect us to behave logically, to surrender when the odds become impossible." Maria could hear the smile in Chen's voice, despite the darkness. "But humans don't fight logically. We fight emotionally. We do stupid, impossible things because we're angry or afraid or protecting something we love. That's what makes us dangerous. The plasma cutting grew brighter, casting eerie shadows through the bunker. They could see the outline of the entrance beginning to glow as superheated metal started to melt. Rodriguez, Kim, when that door comes down, you focus fire on the first three through. Make them think we've got more people than we do. Thompson, Williams, if you can fight, we need you. If not, stay down and stay quiet. Chen turned to Maria. You still have time to surrender. Tell them you're a civilian, non-combatant. They might. No, Maria cut her off. The word came out harder than she'd intended. I'm done hiding behind what other people think I am. Something had crystallized in Maria's mind during the past few hours. All her life, she'd been defined by other people's expectations. The hairdresser, the civilian, the support personnel. Even here, surrounded by trained soldiers, she was still just the person who cut hair. But definitions only had power if you accepted them. The plasma cutting reached the locking mechanism. Sparks showered into the bunker as the door began to sag on its hinges. 30 seconds, Kim estimated. Chen grabbed the communicator one last time. Lucky Strike, if you're still listening, tell them we fought. Tell them humans don't go quietly. The response came immediately, clear and strong. Phoenix 6, this is Captain Sarah Murphy of the Lucky Strike. I'm a former Coalition Marine, and I'm watching 52 of the toughest sons of bitches in the galaxy get ready to learn something about human nature. Give them hell. The door exploded inward in a shower of molten metal and plasma fire. The first Zephyrian through the breach was massive, even by their species standards, 7 feet tall with chitinous armor that gleamed like black ice. Its forearms ended in claws that could cut through steel, and its compound eyes tracked movement with inhuman precision. Rodriguez and Kim opened fire simultaneously, their assault rifles chattering in the confined space. The first Zephyrian stumbled but didn't fall. Their armor was too good, their biology too resilient. But the second and third hesitated for just a moment, and in that moment of uncertainty, something remarkable happened. Williams, despite his injuries, raised his sidearm and put 3 rounds into the lead Zephyrian's head. The creature dropped like a stone. Thompson, who had never fired a shot in anger during his entire military career, emptied his magazine into the breach, forcing the next wave to take cover. And Maria Santos, who 6 months ago had been worried about split ends and hair color, stepped into the line of fire with a borrowed pistol and started shooting with the calm precision of someone who had finally found her purpose. The Zephyrians had expected resistance, but they hadn't expected this. Humans were supposed to be weak, emotional, easily broken. They weren't supposed to fight with the desperate fury of cornered animals while maintaining the tactical discipline of professional soldiers. The first assault faltered. In the narrow confines of the bunker entrance, the Zephyrians' numerical advantage was meaningless. They could only come through 1 or 2 at a time, and each one faced the concentrated fire of 7 humans who had nothing left to lose. Reloading, Rodriguez called out, dropping his empty magazine. Covering, Kim shifted position, laying down suppressing fire. Maria found herself moving without conscious thought, using the bunker's layout to maximum advantage. Her hands moved with the same steady precision she'd once used to cut hair, careful, deliberate, never-wasting motion. The pistol bucked in her grip with each shot, and she was amazed to discover that her target practice with paper silhouettes translated surprisingly well to combat. The Zephyrians pulled back to reassess. In the sudden quiet, they could hear chittering commands being issued outside, tactical discussions in a language that sounded like angry insects. They're bringing up heavier weapons, Chen analyzed. Probably plasma artillery, they'll just blow the whole bunker. Jackson was still working on the communications equipment. I'm getting signal boosts from somewhere. Lucky Strike must be amplifying our transmission. The implications hit Chen immediately. They're broadcasting our fight, live. Across human space, people were listening to 7 trapped soldiers make their last stand. The Coalition might have written them off, but their own people were watching. This is Phoenix 6, Chen spoke into the communicator. We're still here, still fighting, and we want everyone to know humans don't abandon their own. Outside, the chittering had stopped. The Zephyrians were preparing for something big. But inside the bunker, 7 people who had been written off as expendable were about to show the galaxy what humans were really capable of when they stopped trying to fit into other people's expectations. Maria checked her ammunition, half a magazine left. It wouldn't be enough, but then again, enough was a relative concept. She'd never expected to die a hero's death, but she'd always believed in doing a job well, no matter what that job was. Today, her job was staying human in a galaxy that had forgotten what that meant. The plasma artillery strike never came. Instead, the chittering outside changed tone, becoming rapid and agitated. Something was happening beyond the bunker that the trapped humans couldn't see. "They're arguing," Williams observed weakly. Despite his injuries, his communications training let him recognize the patterns of debate even in an alien language. Something's got them confused. Chen pressed her ear to the wall. The vibrations had changed. Instead of the methodical preparation for assault, she could hear movement in multiple directions. The Zephyrians were repositioning, but not for attack. They were setting up a perimeter. They're not preparing to breach, she realized. They're preparing to defend. The communicator crackled to life without warning. This time, the voice that came through wasn't human. It was the mechanical buzz of a Zephyrian translator, but the words were directed at them, not at their own forces. "Human soldiers in the bunker, this is War Commander Vexthak of the 47th Imperial Strike Force. You will stand down immediately." Chen exchanged glances with her team in the dim light. Standard Zephyrian protocol was to demand surrender, not to negotiate. Something had changed the tactical situation. "This is Lieutenant Commander Chen. State your terms." There was a pause before the response came, and when it did, Maria could swear she heard frustration in the alien's mechanical voice. "You have placed us in an unusual position. Your continued resistance has attracted unwanted attention." Through Jackson's jury-rigged equipment, they could hear overlapping transmissions, multiple human voices speaking rapidly in what sounded like coordinated communications. "Lucky strike to Phoenix 6, we've got company. 3. No, 4 additional human vessels just dropped out of FTL. Looks like cargo haulers, but they're broadcasting coalition military codes." Chen's heart raced. "Lucky strike, can you identify those vessels?" "Phoenix 6, these are civilian contractors. Mining ships, freight haulers, even what looks like a passenger liner. But they're all crewed by humans, and they're all heading for your position." The implications were staggering. News of their situation hadn't just reached military command. It had spread through the civilian networks that connected human settlements across the galaxy. The merchant vessel's relay had turned their last stand into a rallying cry. War Commander Vexthak's voice cut through the communications chatter, and this time the mechanical translation couldn't hide his agitation. "Human soldiers, your people are interfering with a legitimate military operation. Order them to withdraw immediately." Chen almost laughed. "Commander, I don't think you understand how humans work. We don't take orders from people who abandon us to die." More voices joined the communication channel. Maria heard accents from a dozen human worlds: Earth, New Cardiff, Kepler Station, the mining colonies of the asteroid belt. Ships that had been going about their normal business were dropping everything to converge on Zirian Prime. "This is Captain Alina Rodriguez of the freight hauler Determination. Phoenix 6, we're 2 hours out and closing fast. Just want you to know, the whole damn galaxy is watching." "Phoenix 6, this is Commander James Park, formerly of Coalition Navy. I'm aboard the passenger liner New Horizon with 300 volunteers. We may not be soldiers, but we're still human." The transmissions kept coming. Miners, traders, colonists, even tourists. Humans from every corner of space were abandoning their plans and heading toward a remote military outpost they'd never heard of, to help people they'd never met, simply because those people were human and in trouble. War Commander Vexthak's next transmission carried a tone that Maria had never heard from a Zephyrian before: uncertainty. "This is irregular. Military protocols do not account for civilian intervention on this scale." Chen smiled grimly. "That's because you don't understand what you're fighting. You think you're facing 7 isolated soldiers. What you're really facing is the entire human race." The truth of that statement was becoming evident on the communications channel. Ships were coordinating approaches, sharing intelligence, even organizing themselves into impromptu battle groups. The loose network of human civilization was rapidly becoming a focused response force. Lucky strike to all human vessels, I'm uploading tactical data on Zephyrian positions. Looks like they've got about 50 ships in system, mostly light cruisers and fighters. New Horizon acknowledging. Our passenger manifest includes 200 former coalition military personnel. We're ready to provide ground support if needed. Maria listened to the coordination efforts with growing amazement. These weren't trained military units following established protocols. These were ordinary people making it up as they went along, improvising solutions to problems they'd never faced before. It should have been chaos, but somehow it was working. The Zephyrians outside the bunker were clearly having the same realization. The chittering had become rapid and high-pitched, what passed for panic in their species. War Commander, Chen spoke into the communicator, I think it's time to discuss new terms. The response came quickly, what are you proposing? Safe passage for all personnel in this bunker, immediate withdrawal of Zephyrian forces from this system, and full disclosure of any intelligence networks operating within Coalition Command. There was a long pause. When Vexthak responded, his tone had shifted to something approaching respect. You are in no position to make demands, human. Your forces are still outnumbered 1,000 to 1. Are we? Chen asked. Jackson, what's our current support count? Jackson had been monitoring the communication traffic. 17 ships confirmed inbound, with more arriving every hour. Between military veterans, reserve personnel, and volunteers, we're looking at approximately 8,000 humans responding to our situation. 8,000. Maria tried to process the number. 12 hours ago, she had been alone in the galaxy, abandoned by her allies and facing certain death. Now, 8,000 of her own species were racing across space to ensure that she lived through the day. But more than that, they were coming to make a statement. The Coalition might treat humans as expendable, but humans didn't treat each other that way. When one was threatened, all were threatened. When one was abandoned, none were safe. This is unprecedented, Vexthak transmitted. No species has ever responded to individual casualties with such coordination. Thompson looked up from his position by the wall. That's because no other species needs to. The Draknari protect their own through military hierarchy. The Ethereals share collective consciousness. But humans, we're all we've got, so we take care of each other. The truth of that statement resonated through the bunker. Humans had always been the outsiders in the galactic community, too emotional, too unpredictable, too individualistic to fit into established order. But that same individualism meant that every human life mattered, because there were so few of them and they were so far from home. War Commander, Chen continued, you have a choice. You can continue this assault and face not just my team, but every human ship in the galaxy, or you can recognize that the rules of this engagement have changed. Another long pause. Outside, the chittering had stopped completely. Maria could imagine the Zephyrian commander consulting with his superiors, trying to explain how a simple extraction operation had turned into a potential interspecies conflict. When Vexthak responded, his tone was formal, almost ritualistic. Lieutenant Commander Chen, the 47th Imperial Strike Force acknowledges your tactical position. We propose a temporary cessation of hostilities while we consult with higher authority. Acknowledged. My people will hold defensive positions pending further negotiations. The communication channel erupted in celebration as human voices across the system responded to news of the ceasefire. But Maria noticed that Chen wasn't joining the celebration. Her expression remained focused, alert. This isn't over, Chen said quietly. They're buying time, probably calling for reinforcements, but we've accomplished something important here. What's that? Maria asked. Chen looked at each of them in turn. 5 soldiers, 1 wounded communications specialist, and a hairdresser who had discovered she was capable of more than she'd ever imagined. We've shown them that when you abandon a human, you don't just lose one person. You turn the entire human race into your enemy. That's a lesson the Coalition and everyone else won't forget. Outside, 52 elite Zephyrian soldiers maintained their perimeter, but they were no longer preparing to assault a bunker. They were guarding a symbol, 7 humans who had refused to die quietly, and in doing so, had awakened something in their species that the galaxy had never seen before. The hairdresser had become a soldier. The abandoned had become a cause. And somewhere in space, 8,000 humans were racing to prove that no one fights alone when they fight for each other. The first human ships arrived 18 hours later, emerging from hyperspace in formation despite being cobbled together from civilian vessels across the galaxy. Maria watched through Jackson's improvised periscope as cargo haulers, mining ships, and passenger liners arranged themselves in tactical positions that should have been impossible for untrained crews to execute. But they had trained crews, just not officially. Every ship carried veterans, reservists, or active-duty personnel on leave. The human diaspora might be scattered across 1,000 worlds, but it turned out that military experience was more common than anyone had realized. "This is Admiral Patricia Hayes aboard the merchant vessel Determination, assuming command of all human vessels in system," came the crisp voice over the communications channel. "Zephyrian forces, you are ordered to stand down and prepare for inspection." Maria's eyebrows rose. "Admiral." "Former Coalition Navy," Chen explained. "Forced into early retirement 6 months ago. Budget cuts," they said. Her tone made it clear what she thought of that explanation. War Commander Vexthak's response carried a note of incredulous anger. "You have no authority here, human. This is an Imperial military operation." "War Commander, I have 17 armed vessels and 8,000 personnel who disagree with your assessment. Shall we test your position?" Through the periscope, Maria could see Zephyrian fighters launching from their ships, moving to intercept the human vessels. But something strange was happening. The human ships weren't scattering or taking defensive positions. Instead, they were advancing in perfect coordination, as if they'd been drilling together for months. "How are they doing that?" she asked. Williams, despite his injuries, managed a weak grin. "Mesh networking. Human ships have been sharing tactical data, crew assignments, even command protocols. They've turned the entire fleet into one giant distributed computer." It was brilliant and completely unprecedented. No military had ever attempted real-time integration of civilian vessels on this scale. It should have been impossible to coordinate, but humans had one advantage that no other species possessed: the ability to improvise solutions to problems that had never been solved before. "Zephyrian fighters are engaging," came Admiral Hayes's voice. "All vessels implement pattern Omega." Maria watched in fascination as the human fleet suddenly scattered in what looked like complete chaos. Ships broke formation, accelerated in random directions, and seemed to lose all coordination. The Zephyrian fighters moved to exploit the apparent disarray. Then the trap closed. The scattered human ships had been carefully positioning themselves to create overlapping fields of fire. As the Zephyrian fighters closed in, they found themselves caught in a crossfire from multiple directions. Mining lasers, cargo handling systems, even passenger liner point defense guns opened fire simultaneously. "Scratch 6 enemy fighters," reported one of the ship captains. "They really didn't expect a garbage scow to be armed with military-grade weapons." Chen was studying the tactical display on Jackson's equipment. "They're not just fighting, they're sending a message." "Which is?" "That humans don't need the Coalition's permission to defend themselves." The battle was brief but decisive. The Zephyrian fighters were designed to engage military vessels with predictable tactics and standard weapon systems. They weren't prepared for cargo haulers that fired mining charges like artillery shells, or passenger liners that used emergency airlock systems to launch improvised projectiles. War Commander Vexthak requested parley within 30 minutes. The negotiations took place aboard Admiral Hayes's flagship, a converted ore hauler called Determination that had been refitted with communication equipment from a dozen different ships. Maria found herself included in the delegation, not as a hairdresser or civilian, but as one of the 7 who had held the bunker. The Zephyrian commander was exactly what she'd expected: tall, armored, and radiating controlled menace. But there was something else in his compound eyes that she hadn't anticipated: respect. "Your resistance was educational," Vexthak admitted through his translator. "Imperial intelligence significantly underestimated human tactical capabilities." Admiral Hayes, a stern woman in her 60s wearing a patchwork uniform assembled from various civilian outfits, leaned back in her improvised command chair. "War Commander, I don't think you understand the situation. This isn't about tactics. This is about who we are." "Explain." Hayes gestured to the people around the table, not just the 7 from the bunker, but representatives from every ship in the fleet. Miners, traders, colonists, even a few tourists who had volunteered for boarding actions despite having no military training whatsoever. Every other species in the galaxy has some form of central authority. Government, collective consciousness, hierarchical command structure. When your leaders make a decision, your people follow it. But humans, she smiled grimly, we're different. We make our own decisions. Vexthak's translator struggled with the concept. You have no unified command authority. Oh, we have governments, Hayes continued. But when those governments abandoned our people, we decided they no longer spoke for us. Today, the human race acted independently of any official authority structure. The implications were clearly troubling to the Zephyrian commander. This is unprecedented in galactic law. So are a lot of things humans do, Chen interjected, which is why you should be very careful about threatening us. Maria found herself speaking before she'd consciously decided to. War Commander, you sent 52 soldiers to capture 7 humans. Why so many? Vexthak's attention focused on her with uncomfortable intensity. You are the hairdresser, the non-combatant. I was a hairdresser. Today I'm someone who fought beside her friends when they needed her. Maria met his gaze steadily. You didn't answer my question. There was a long pause before Vexthak responded. Imperial combat doctrine classifies human forces as unpredictable and potentially dangerous despite apparent technological and numerical disadvantages. Standard protocol requires overwhelming force ratios when engaging human units. Admiral Hayes raised an eyebrow. Interesting. So the Zephyrian Empire respects human military capabilities more than the Coalition does. The Coalition underestimates humans, Vexthak agreed. This has proven to be a significant strategic error. The truth was becoming clear. While the Coalition treated humans as expendable support personnel, their enemies had been studying human combat performance and drawing very different conclusions. The Zephyrians knew something that the Coalition had refused to acknowledge. What do you want from us? Hayes asked directly. Vexthak consulted a device that projected holographic text in Zephyrian script. The Empire proposes a formal military alliance. Your species would be granted full autonomy within Imperial space, along with preferential trading rights and technology sharing agreements. The offer was stunning. The Zephyrians were proposing to give humans everything the Coalition had denied them: respect, autonomy, and equal partnership. In exchange for, Chen asked suspiciously, military cooperation against Coalition forces. Your tactical unpredictability would be valuable in breaking their established defensive patterns. Hayes was quiet for a long moment, considering. Around the table, Maria could see the others wrestling with the implications. The Coalition had abandoned them, left them to die, and then tried to cover it up. The Zephyrians, their supposed enemies, were offering them respect and partnership. There's just one problem with your offer, Hayes said finally. Which is? We're human. We don't abandon our own people, even when they've abandoned us. Vexthak's translator made confused noises as it tried to process the statement. Hayes continued, the Coalition leadership may have written us off, but there are millions of humans serving in Coalition forces who don't know what their commanders really think of them. We won't abandon them to save ourselves. Then what do you propose? Chen leaned forward. Safe passage for all human personnel who want to leave Coalition service, full disclosure of any intelligence operations targeting human units, and a formal investigation into the decision-making process that led to this incident. The Coalition will never agree to such terms. Then they'll have to explain to the galaxy why 8,000 civilians were willing to risk their lives to save 7 people that the Coalition claimed didn't exist. Admiral Hayes' smile was sharp as a blade. This conversation is being broadcast on all human networks. Every settlement, every ship, every human in the galaxy knows what happened here. Maria understood what Hayes was really saying. The Coalition could cover up the abandonment of 7 people on a remote outpost. They couldn't cover up the mobilization of the entire human civilian fleet in response. Vexthak was quiet for several minutes, undoubtedly consulting with his superiors. When he spoke again, his tone had changed. The Empire respects your loyalty to your species. We withdraw our forces from this system and will consider the tactical implications of your demonstration. And the intelligence operations will be investigated. The Empire values military competence above political convenience. After the Zephyrians departed, Maria found herself standing on the observation deck of the Determination, watching human ships prepare for the journey home. In 18 hours, her life had been completely transformed. She was no longer just a hairdresser who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. She was a symbol of something the galaxy was just beginning to understand. Chen joined her at the viewport. So what now? Back to cutting hair. Maria thought about it. She could return to her old life, pretend this had never happened, go back to worrying about mundane things. But she'd learned something important about herself in that bunker, something she couldn't just forget. Actually, I think I might have a different career in mind, she said. Turns out I'm pretty good at taking care of people when they're in trouble. Chen smiled. The human fleet could use someone with your skills, someone who understands that the job is about more than just following orders. Around them, ships that had never been designed for military operations prepared to return to their normal duties. But nothing would be normal again. The galaxy had seen what humans were capable of when they stopped trying to fit into other people's expectations and started being themselves. The coalition would adapt, eventually. They would have to, because the alternative was losing the most unpredictable and resourceful species in the galaxy to their enemies. But more importantly, humans had learned something about themselves. They were stronger together than apart. They were more capable than anyone had imagined, and they were done being anyone's expendable resources. Maria Santos, former hairdresser, looked out at the stars and smiled. The galaxy was about to discover what happened when humans stopped being polite and started being themselves. It was going to be very interesting.